All right, so we're recording now. Um, my name is Mike Elk. I'm the head of Payday Report here. We were founded about 10 years ago when I was illegally fired in the union drive at Politico, and since then we've been supported by our readers, many of whom are movers and shakers and activists and troublemakers in their own rights. Um, and so we've been trying to hold more of these sort of calls, create a sense of community, to get a sense of what people are interested in and to get information out there. One of the things that we've tracked over the years, we got a lot of publicity for, was during the pandemic. We tracked a giant strike wave during the pandemic. It didn't look like a traditional strike wave, and some people didn't necessarily agree with the characterization of it, since it wasn't always unions calling strikes. Actually, for the most part, it wasn't unions calling strikes. We did is that we created a research director, Phil, who's on the call, a Google News catchnet, and we found everything had words like walkout or shut down, things like that in there. And we recorded over 3,000 strikes. What was interesting during this period is that the highest number of strikes recorded during the whole pandemic was the month after George Floyd was killed. There was over 600. And our parameters of that was that a business closed as part of a call to action. Some people said, well, that's not really a strike, but at the same time, the boss wasn't calling it. We've also covered other big strike waves. We covered the Red for Ed strike wave, which wasn't necessarily legal, but certainly had a lot of impact. Right now, there's calls for a big walkout throughout Minnesota. And in addition to the calls for the walkouts throughout Minnesota, what we're seeing now is we just created a map. We're starting to do some tracking, at least 24 solidarity actions across the country. Maybe not walkouts per se, but in an era where we've been redefining what strikes looks like, going back to the fast food strikes. This is an interesting dilemma. So I have Kieran Knutson here, who's president of a big local up in CWA, and he's can take it from here. So Kieran, why don't you start by talking a bit about how this came about and what's going on as you guys plan?
Hey, Mike, and thank you for this opportunity to tell people about what's going on in Minneapolis and Minnesota more broadly. Yeah, so I mean, for the past 6 weeks, there's been this incredible and sort of indescribable reign of terror that's been going on against people in Minnesota, and particularly targeting, Latinos, Africans, and Southeast Asians, but also a lot of other people have been caught up in it, including U.S. citizens of many ethnicities and Native American people, which is insane, but that's what's going on here. Tremendous amount of violence, brutality, people being ripped out of their cars, people being taken in front of their children, people being taken from hospitals and daycares and schools, hospitals, and it's just enraging, constantly enraging. The other day, they marched a elderly Hmong man out of his home in his underwear and house shoes, and only to have to return him later when it was discovered he's a U.S. citizen. It's just this kind of humiliation that I think is, and murder and humiliation that it's meant to both scare and people and terrify people and intimidate us. So in answer to your question, Mike, about where this strike came from, I mean, it came from a bunch of places. There's a trade union movement in the Twin Cities that has its strengths and weaknesses like everywhere, but it has an experience with struggle and an experience with relating to social movements that emerge from the community. And as they emerge from the community, they infect the workplaces. And if the unions are listening, the unions can become a part of it as well. So I'm talking about particularly 2020 with the George Floyd uprising, which was an earthquake, a political, social earthquake in our city and, of course, all around the country. And so many of the networks that exist now, so many of the organizers that are, in the forefront of this also, were part of that movement. And so I think it's really important for anyone understanding why is Minneapolis resisting. I know there's been these different think pieces about it and, talking about, what's in our water or our Scandinavian heritage or whatever it might be, but really it's not hard to figure out. It's experience from struggle and networks of organization that exist that came out of struggle. And then I think, out of just the reality that we have and the total ineffectiveness of labor tactics that are caught within, the U.S. labor control system, as Joe Burns calls it, there's been some ideas about, well, we need to start thinking beyond what, the tactics that have been around for a while. And I think for a while, people were thinking about this UAW call for 2028. And then there's this Mayday coalition that's emerged that's thinking about Mayday stuff. But obviously, after Renee Good was killed, I think a lot of us said, we have to move now. We have to do stuff now. And so one of the SEIU locals that represents janitors and security guards in the big corporate buildings and office buildings, suburbs in the city, sort of took this first step of calling people together. They're a local that is heavily immigrant in its membership, both Latino and East African members especially. And then a number of other unions jumped on board. Our union, I think, was the first union to sign on to SEIU's call. I represent AT&T telecom workers, call center technicians, and retail AT&T workers, as well as a DirecTV call center, ADT home technicians, and Activision, a video game company, the quality assurance kids who play Call of Duty all day looking for bugs. And so, we signed on to it, and then we've been promoting it both within our own workplaces, but also, within our social scenes, encouraging friends and family, neighbors, relatives to get involved. And so that's kind of where this movement hit. But really, it's the reality too. I have to really highlight this, is that the governor, the mayor, both Democratic Farmer Labor Party politicians in Minnesota don't have any plan. There is no program to resist ICE. They admit what ICE is doing. They say ICE is an occupation force, that it's doing illegal, unconstitutional activity, that it's being violent, brutal, but they have no program or plan about what to do to stop it. So I think many of us who are seeing this open terror on our streets are like, oh, what can we do? And this seems to be a major escalation of our side in terms of being able to impact the society and the profiteers, the people that are at the top of our social pyramid. And I'll just say one more thing. I know I've been talking a lot to answer your question, Mike, but one of the things that SEIU put forward, which I thought was interesting, was that in San Francisco, apparently, I remember Trump had been talking about San Francisco as one of the cities they're going to go to. But SEIU pointed out that I guess one of the big Silicon Valley billionaire tech bros called up Trump and said, hey, we don't need you in San Francisco. And Trump agreed to it. So part of the thinking, I think, behind this from SEIU's point of view is that we're going to put pressure on the CEO of Target, of United Healthcare, of Delta Airlines, of 3M, of Medtronic, that kind of thing. And that's going to be some leverage to try and get the dogs called off.
Is that also leverage for organizing that might be going on at Target or those other places that they're seeing, hey, look what the unions are going out and doing?
I think it sure should be. I mean, I think that, I think we're in such a kind of like defensive resistance mode right now, that I think we need to be thinking about organizing proactively, because there are people coming out in droves to resist ICE. Everybody's thinking about it. It's putting everybody on a common page. And I think to the degree the unions can associate themselves with this movement, there is really opportunities to organize. Target is going to become a big target of the movement in the coming days and weeks. And I think that your point is an important one, that we also not need to see it just in terms of short-term damage to their profits, but also in terms of building workers' power, with the people that work there. I don't know if people saw this terrible video of two young Latino guys who, are pushing carts at Target, working at Target, getting savagely jumped by ICE agents in the parking lot, while they have the reflective vests on working. It's fucking terrible.
Yeah. And Kieran, what does that also mean? I mean, this is a non-traditional strike, and I think some of the criticism we got when we talked about the BLM-inspired strikes is that it involves working with small business owners, people in the Latino community, people in the Somali community, just small business owners. I mean, what has that been like, as a union leader to, team up with these folks?
Well, a couple notes on that. The first one is like, look, like the clouds are not going to open, and God is not going to produce the perfect general strike to lay down in front of us, right? It's an none of us have done this before. None of us have. I've organized in 2011 in Wisconsin. I put a lot of energy in trying to motivate for a general strike, and there's some similarities between those two experiences we could talk about. But look, none of us have done this before. We're scrapping and pulling at everything we have, and we have to do it with the tools that are in front of us, the people that are in front of us, and those that are willing to step up. So, I mean, is the question that we should, that the small businesses that want to shut down in solidarity with us should not? I mean, it's kind of silly. So I think it is a broad and popular movement. It does include, the small business class. There's a big part of it that is sympathetic to us, in part because they, so many restaurants have lost their kitchen staff because people are hiding. People are just, bunkering down, staying home because it's not worth the risk to go outside to work when these fuckers are picking people off when they take out the fucking garbage. There's another video of a guy at a Chipotle, a Latino dude at Chipotle, taking out the fucking trash. Can you imagine working 7 hours at Chipotle and then you go to take out the trash and some motherfuckers jump you and try and stuff you in a van? I mean, that's the kind of shit that's going on. And so, yeah, I think small businesses that are going to get on board, that's good. It helps create the sort of environment in the city shutting down. And so that doesn't mean that we're not in favor of organizing against them, especially if they're an especially exploitive boss. Well, absolutely. But in this case, I think, they're stepping forward in a way that is not, just about protecting their own sort of position in the society. It's also about solidarity with other people. And so that's really important and good, I think. And then just the question, like, yeah, it's not a strike. We're not because of people's labor, because of contracts people have. It's actually illegal to declare a strike. People could get sued. I could do that, and maybe it'd be politically right. But then if they sue our bank, then all of our members will lose. Potentially lose the money we have. So it's just like a matter of deciding what the step is to do at the moment. But I'll say this, the experience of doing this on Friday then means we get to think about what is next and how can we do it deeper and stronger. And I think those conversations will be a lot more valuable and based on, something real than the ones we're having before we've even done it.
One last question, then I'll open it up for people that have comments. So, obviously there's a lot of legal hurdles here. And I think it's almost just from reading the literature, unions are calling for a day of action while other groups are putting out posters, flyers saying no work, no school, etc. Does that also show the sort of flexibility from a legal standpoint that you need in order for unions to have allies in the communities that can do the sort of hoodwink nod, so that way labor leaders aren't saying, oh, yeah, we endorsed a general strike per se.
Yeah, I think yeah, flexibility is important. I also think having like initiative and decentralizing the campaign, letting different people put their own sort of stamp on it, is that's just a normal way movements exist, and I don't think we should fight that. I think we should sort of celebrate that. It also lets you know where other forces, what they're thinking, if they're able to sort of speak freely about what their perspective is for this. My feeling, and we'll see. But my feeling is that a lot of these bosses will not want the smoke. Like if this is a successful major action and that there are, tens of thousands of workers stay home from work, which is what I expect is going to happen in the Twin Cities, maybe even hundreds of thousands is not off the table. I mean, there's even bigger numbers that are not off the table, but let's go with tens of thousands. If tens of thousands of workers stay home from work and a big percentage of them are active in a show of force against the regime and against ICE, that's going to be a huge thing that a lot of bosses are just going to say, okay, Monday, let's talk about Monday. They're not going to want to talk about Friday. I think a lot of them are not going to want to be the poster child for the enemy of this movement. And that's what I've been saying in the meetings where people have been trying to talk through the legal niceties of what do we do? And I say, put them on blast. If somebody fires somebody for the strike, fucking put their name up there and there's a good chance they will be going out of business soon, or they're going to be paying a big cost for what they're doing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to open it up to questions. If somebody has a question, use the hand signal or send me a message or something just so we can do this orderly. Does anybody want to start things off?
Have you been keeping up today with the sort of outside press that you've been getting for this upcoming thing on Friday? Because looks like all the school kids in New York City are going to walk out on Friday also. And the Financial Times noticed. I haven't seen if the Economist has yet. People are talking about this not in Minneapolis.
Yep, and that's amazing to see. Things are moving so quickly. It's hard to either be surprised, but I'm a little bit surprised at how quickly it's moved outside of Minnesota, where my sense is that a lot of people still don't know quite the conditions that are here. I think people who are really tuned in do, and maybe more and more people are, especially young people, with the TikToks and all that, But yeah, it's huge. It's huge. It's powerful. I also think it's defense against the military. If there are sizable actions in other cities, I think that will be another factor that the Pentagon and the White House have to think about if they want to drop troops in Minnesota. So yeah, I mean, let's let these other areas of resistance bloom.
Maxine, do you want to go next?
Okay, hi. Thank you for I should turn on my camera here. Thank you for being here. And what I was wondering is I'm in Seattle, and as of a few hours ago, I don't know of any organized solidarity actions through the Central Labor Council or other unions with Minnesota. But I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit more about what you expect to happen on Friday and what other unions might be involved. And is there an assembly point, or like give kind of a picture of what you think Friday will look like? We'll do what we can here. But thank you.
Good question. So there's a mass rally that's planned in downtown Minneapolis at 2:00. It is going to be, I think, 9 below zero for a high in Minneapolis on Friday. So I think, the conditions are such that it's going to aid us in getting workers to stay home. It's going to hurt us in getting workers to come to the rally. And I think the hardcore, now I'm working on getting the hardcore out to the street, because we do want to see a big, powerful action downtown. Now, earlier in the day, though, there's a call for action at the airport, and I think that's going to become a target. And one with there's a lot of workers, a lot of immigrant workers in the airport. So I think that's going to become a target in future days and weeks, but it's also a target on Friday. So I think there is going to be the initial kind of actions there. And then also the Whipple Federal Building, which is near the airport and is the main staging area for ICE. That's where they drive out of every day when they go on their raids and their patrols or whatever. And so there's an action there at 9 a.m. That's kind of a more direct action blockade type of actions. So those will be going off in the morning. Then the afternoon one, March. And I think I'll just say this: it sounds like we've secured an indoor facility. And I'm not supposed to say what, because they haven't signed the contract yet. But you can imagine it would have to be a facility that would hold thousands and thousands of people. So,
Maxine, we're going to release a map probably late tonight or early tomorrow. We've been sort of tracking where folks are calling rallies around the country. It's different groups. Here in Pittsburgh, we know there's going to be a big one. A lot of the immigrants' rights groups called a solidarity one. But we found out, and we'll have it on the map. Will come out tomorrow. The Seattle has a rally at 6 p.m. at the Friday at the federal courthouse. So we're hoping to do our job as journalists and help get that information out there. We've done this sort of mapping in the past because, obviously already, I mean, it's Tuesday, right? And momentum's building. Student groups are getting involved very rapidly. Sunrise is getting involved very rapidly. Other networks are getting involved. So, already we're looking at least 25 cities. And that's just what we know about from Googling and social media searches. So I'm sure there's plenty in the works that we don't know about yet. Kieran, what are you finding? Are networks emerging quickly of folks that want to get involved in this all?
I mean, yes. So the list of groups that have endorsed, SEIU had an endorsement form, who've endorsed it, and it was open to community groups, political groups. So there's all different kinds of political radical tendencies that have endorsed it, but also a number of huge unions, and smaller unions. Our union is about 700 members, our local, and then then these local federations, which are conservative bodies. Usually they are places where ideas for action go to die. But I think they're being pulled along by what's happening in the society at large. Now, one thing that's sort of unclear, but I hope becomes tied in, is to what degree are these neighborhood networks of rapid response, which have just blown up in the Twin Cities. I think there's thousands, 10,000, maybe more people that are watching ICE, that have, downloaded Signal and are part of a neighborhood loop and will go out and confront ICE. I just learned today of a woman at my workplace who, is a pro-union worker, but not particularly active in the local. And I stopped by to talk to her when I was flyering. I was doing desk drops against the rules of the company. We were doing desk drops all day today. And she told me she'd gotten shoved down by ICE because she'd gone out of her house with her whistle and her sister to go confront ICE. She was an older lady, like in her late 50s or early 60s. So, just hearing stories like that from folks that, like I said, are not particularly active in my local, and yet she's doing this great action. So I think that just shows kind of where the consciousness is in the society here. And that, I think hopefully those networks will respond to this as well. I think everybody's doing it, learning on the fly. So many people, in the neighborhood that me and my wife and my brother-in-law live in, just in our neighborhood, there's something like 600 people in this massive Signal loop. So, but everybody's, it's just what people are, mostly really good, but some people with some crazy ideas, some people really, too conservative, I think, for the moment. Some people, bad at social skills and bad at organizing, with so much good enthusiasm and, good faith effort to try and do the right thing. And also people with incredible technical skills. And then also I should mention this as well, because it's kind of cool, is that the working class is a huge intelligence network. Like I learned from a guy that used to be one of our stewards. He quit to start a little cleaning company with his wife, and he works out at the motels where the ICE is staying. And he called me. I hadn't heard from him in a couple of years. He called me to say, they got housing contracts through June, which is interesting and kind of scary that at least part of ICE is planning to be housed in hotels up through June here. Of course, that can change, but it was good information. Another one we found out from somebody, who worked at one of the airlines. Only one of the international airlines had leaked that ICE was actually going to be inside the terminals. They'd been outside harassing Uber drivers, and they'd been obviously putting people on planes for deportations, but they hadn't been in the terminals fucking with people. And we got word from one of the airline workers of that. So we were able to kind of notify the unions that were out at the airport that was going to become a reality a few days before it actually happened.
Yeah. Kieran, what do you think it says, given, this sort of, I guess, distributed organizing, these signal groups, et cetera, that, unions are having to adapt their tactics to, sort of having a broad-based class movement, because a lot of these folks that are getting involved in this are not union members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's what it is. And the unions do need to sort of, I think, learn some things from it, be open to learning stuff from it. I mean, for our local already, like we use signal loops for our different steward silos for the different areas we represent. So it's not something that's totally foreign to like our most sort of like, kind of dedicated and organized part of our union. And it's a easy sort of like thing to jump into, or an easier thing to jump into. But yeah, I think we need, there's a lot of things people can learn from the street movement, both kind of the militant blockade types and also the neighborhood observers and the patrols. All of that stuff is rich in lessons.
Yeah, and what do you think? I mean, this is such a potent threat. I think just pulling it off once, that the threat of it could become really scary to businesses elsewhere for a long time to come.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that it's this strike in and of itself, or this day of action, is not going to stop ICE. It seems doubtful. There is rumors now going around, and who knows what, that Trump is planning on making an appearance this week in the Twin Cities, which would be insane and provocative. But my point is that, what we learn from this this isn't just a one-off. What I want it to be is something that, delivers a blow and shows how serious we are, and shows kind of like, provide some lessons for us learning in terms of building the movement, but also provide some ideas about how to take the next step. And what does the next step look? What does it take to shut down the cities for a sustained amount of time? Because that is a big jump. That would be a very major jump. But if there's another murder, if there's another total outrage, then I think those things start being on the table again.
Let me ask one last. Does anybody have any last questions? Anybody who didn't get a chance to ask wants to ask anything? Raise your hand. Jerry, you want to unmute yourself? Ask a question.
Absolutely, and thank you. I wanted to kind of tap the thing that I tapped earlier, and also, like, I noticed looking at Newsweek, of all places, that they had a complete list of all the small businesses that were supporting, like, that they said, oh yeah, we're done. We're calling it off. We're calling it off for Friday, and we're paying all our people, like, preemptively. And it's pretty clear that, I mean, a lot of them were small scale food service, but first of all, I'm reading this in Newsweek. You're doing very well, in my opinion, on the people want to be involved. And the other thing I wanted to point out is what this looks like in the South, which is where I am. All eyes are on you, because we know we're next.
Yeah, just real quick on that. Like, for instance, I think there's over a dozen UFCW grocery shops, which is big buildings with dozens, if not hundreds of employees, are going to be shut down. The bosses sensed that was the direction it's going, and this major mass absenteeism, that's sort of being promoted by the movement in the Twin Cities, and are just decided to close it, and sort of try and wrap themselves in at least neutrality, if not sort of Minnesota patriotism or whatever. But that's a huge thing, and that's a massive thing. I think there's going to be mass absenteeism on the Metro Transit. That's both sort of like organized by the structure of the union, and also by radicals that work in the system, within the context where the official union is also saying, we're not telling you not to go to work officially. So it's a complicated thing with, but I think it's going to be a significant event. It's going to involve tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, possibly even larger numbers of people. And it's going to set a stage for another level of struggle that we haven't seen.
So one last question from David from New Jersey, and then we're going to have to run in a few minutes. Strangely, I actually have to go get beers with the Wall Street Journal's labor reporter, who has some questions about this. So I think there's going to be a lot of publicity. David, you want to go?
Yeah, thanks. Kieran, thanks to you, all the people in Minnesota who are doing such great work. This is really inspiring, and thank you for the great effort. I guess what I'm concerned about is we've seen big, seemingly, militant actions like the Day Without Immigrants about a decade ago. And I guess I'm just concerned that felt like it just petered out. And I'm just wondering what lessons we've been able to learn from that going
Mhm.
forward. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's true there was not the same kind of follow-ups after that Day Without an Immigrant. I do think that action and that day had an imprint on people, and I think that is one of the things. For instance, a number of the immigrant rights organizers that are part of this movement in the Twin Cities right now, cut their teeth during that 2006, I believe it was 2006 period. So I don't want to say that it didn't have sort of follow-up punches at the time. It wasn't able to build a movement that and it got sort of people got complacent when when the heat was taken off for a little bit, or at least wasn't as ugly as it is now. So I think the only thing that prevents it from slipping back is to try and consolidate victories like this or actions like this into organization where people are able to debate and discuss the lessons of it and try to apply it going forward.